Alright, I am back with another video, and, I never intended to have, like, a YouTuber intro, but it just kind of stuck, that whole alright thing. Or maybe I'll try something different, hold on. Hello! No. I'm just going to stick with what I normally do. Anyways, I am back with another video, as I said, and today we are doing a build request. I was asked to do a fire-based monk, which is a fairly simple concept. I mean, you just go 12 levels and 4 elements monk, picking all the fire spells, grab some interesting looking equipment, and bing bang bosh, you're done. I mean, and yeah, you would have a pretty solid build. You'd get a lot of key points, a lot of extra movement, be able to go into Dex and Wisdom pretty easily, and, just get a ton of AC, a ton of maneuverability, a ton of interesting and unique abilities, and you'd be set. So, while I would probably say that if you just want to build a straight flame monk, that would be a good route to go, I'm going to provide something a little bit interesting. At least to me. I don't think this is, like, maybe the most optimal way to do it. In fact, probably just going all the way to Monk 12 would be the most optimal way to do it, at the very least stats-wise. However, I wanted to try showing off something here that I thought was a pretty cool combination, and kind of adds radiant damage into the mix. So you probably already know where I'm going with this, but humour me, because I feel like the justifications for the class combo will be fun, and also the equipment is going to make this super, super cool as well, I think. So, let's get into the build. First of all, we're obviously going to be starting as a monk. I feel like we want these monk abilities pretty much as early as we can get them, and starting off as monk is going to give us everything we want, as we are going to be primarily a monk. First and foremost, so just getting that unarmored defense, the weapon proficiencies that we want, in this case being simple weapons, and just some overall decent skills, and again getting that unarmored defense and flurry of blows right off the bat is going to be super, super important. So as for our ability scores, you have a few options here. I mean, I would say you definitely want 16 Dex, 16 Wisdom, and at least 14 Constitution, and the rest can kind of be whatever you want. In fact, I've kind of gone for a 12 in Strength here, because that just felt right to me, but if you'd rather put that into Charisma or Intelligence, there would be nothing really wrong with that. Even if you wanted to maybe take some points out of Strength and maybe put your Dexterity or Wisdom up to 17 to bump it up with Ethel's Boon, that might be a little bit more optimal stat-wise, but otherwise, you're going to feel pretty strong regardless. So I think I'm just going to go with a Strength of 12 here to keep it all rounded, just in case you don't want to go for Ethel's Boon. And as for your proficiencies, the ones I've selected here will do you pretty nicely. Next up at Monk Level 2, we're going to be getting the usual Monk shtick. We're going to get our bonus action, Patient Defense, Dash, and Disengage. Patient Defense allowing us to impose disadvantage on attack rolls against us, so pretty good. We're also going to be getting a little bit of unarmored movement, meaning we have a bit more maneuverability, and with every level of Monk, we're going to be getting key points. So yeah, nothing too crazy there. Now, with Monk Level 3, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious we are going to be going Weight of the 4 Elements to gain 3 unique spells, and the ability of Harmony of Fire and Water, allowing you to once per long rest while not in combat regain half your key points rounded down, so that's pretty good. And with Disciple of the Elements, we get to choose 3 spells, and if we're making a Flame Monk, the first option is absolutely Fangs of the Fire Snake. This counts as an attack for the purposes of activating extra attack, but it allows you to attack from afar, basically punching out with your fist and sending a little flame shockwave to deal a bit of bludgeoning and a bit of fire damage, and it also buffs your next melee attack to deal an additional 1 to 4 fire damage, which I think is pretty good if you want to build a fighting character. This is one of the best ways to do it for sure. In fact, if I was to make kind of other like flame warriors going like to at least a little bit of the way in Monk, to get this is definitely a way I would go. But let's have a look at the other options we have. We also have Sweeping Cinder Strike, which is just Burning Hands. And we also have Sphere of Elemental Balance. Now, Sphere of Elemental Balance may seem like a bit of a weird pick when we already have 2 really solid fire options, but the thing that Sphere of Elemental Balance does, because it's Chromatic Orb, you can use this to create a fire surface, which can burn enemies, and among other things. So you definitely want to have this around for the utility options, because when you burn an enemy, it's going to trigger some effects from our equipment. Let's keep moving. Next up on Monk Level 4, we are going to be getting our first feat, and I feel like we really just do need to take an ability score improvement here, and you have a choice. If you care more about your spellcasting, bump up your Wisdom. If you care more about your martial prowess, bump up your Dexterity. It really doesn't matter. I'm going to go with Dexterity 4 now, since we're mainly using our martial capabilities, the basic Monk kit. However, when we get into our multi-class, we will be bumping up that Wisdom. Next up, on monk level 5, we are going to be getting extra attack, which is obviously something we super want. And we're also going to be grabbing stunning strike, unarmed and melee, so it will work with a weapon, and it can possibly stun the target. Really probably would not be spending my key points on this, as I don't think it's very good, but it's up there. It's there if you want it. Next up, at monk level 6, we're going to be getting some extra little bonuses. We're going to be getting key empowered strikes, meaning our unarmed attacks, my apologies, overcome resistance and immunity to non-magical damage. We also get improved unarmed movement, so we get a little bit of an extra speed boost, and we also get to pick another Disciple of the Elements spell, meaning we can grab Embrace of the Inferno, which is Scorching Ray. Pretty good. Now, from here on out, as I said at the start of this video, you can go all the way straight to level 12 of Monk if you so desire. This would get you a buff to your magic at, I believe, level 10? 9 or 10. It would also bump your unarmed strikes, and you would get a ton more key points to be able to do these things a lot more regularly. And to be honest, if I was playing this build kind of just like casually, that is probably what I would do, but I did want to show off the potential implications and like kind of interesting stuff you can do with this multi-class, and I think it's pretty obvious we're going to be going Cleric, and we're going to be taking the Light Domain. Now, again, splitting up our resources like this is a bit strange, but it does work in our favour, because this way we're going to be getting a bunch of interesting utility options, such as our Cleric cantrips, among other things, but also the fact that we also get to now use our fire abilities with either spell slots or key points, meaning we can manage each resource individually, which I think is quite good. And I kind of like the idea of this holy kind of monastic tradition, which blends the idea of radiant and fire damage together with monastic unarmed fighting traditions and kind of a way of life, in order to create a unique and interesting combination of like holy warrior meets kung fu fighter. I mean, there could definitely be this kind of monastic order, and I think it really works. And again, that does mean we get to pick a deity. If you guys can think of a good deity around this kind of concept, feel free to let me know. I can't think of one off the top of my head. Again, I haven't done all my research. Maybe I could see Bahamut or Tiamat, depending if you want it to be good or evil, because, you know, they're dragons, and dragons do fire, so, you know. So I'll just go with Bahamut for now, because I quite like him. But again, it's entirely up to you. As for our prepared spells, we do get some interesting options here, so I'm going to recommend we grab Guiding Bolt as a standard radiant damage piece of kit, really good. Shield of Faith for a little bit of extra armor class, Sanctuary to do all those shenanigans, and I think taking a healing spell, it would probably work well, something like Healing Word to use our bonus action just to get that little bit of extra health, allowing us to be a slight bit of support for our allies. Next up, at Cleric level 2, we're going to be getting our class feature, and I forgot to mention, we also got like Warding Flare at level 1, which essentially makes it that we can pose disadvantage on an attack coming our way, which is super neat. But for level 2, we're going to be getting Turn Undead, like usual, but we're also going to be getting Radiance of the Dawn, allowing us to do 2d10 plus 6 radiant damage to an enemy. Pretty good, it's just like a Divine Radiant Strike, which is nice. We're also going to get an extra spell here, and the game has kind of picked up Cure Wounds for us, which I think is a solid option, but something like Bless or Command could also work nicely. At Cleric level 3, we're going to be getting level 2 spells, including our domain spells, that being Scorching Ray and Flaming Sphere. This is one of the very few ways to actually be able to get Flaming Sphere if you're not a druid, so it's kind of nice to have it here. We're also going to be getting some extra spells at this level, and it's really entirely up to you, but I would personally recommend Aid, because it is just one of the most useful spells in the game, and you'd be getting a decent chunk of extra HP out of it, which is nice when our constitution is a bit lower. Next up, at Cleric level 4, we are going to be getting our next feat, and as I alluded to earlier in the video, we are going to be grabbing that bump to our Wisdom, so our Dexterity and Wisdom are at pretty decent levels. Again, not maxed out, which might suck for you, but I still feel like 18 is a pretty solid score overall to have at this point. But again, if you just went pure Monk, you could have at least one of these at 20. We also get an extra cantrip at this level, and Produce Flame works pretty nicely. With this, we have Sacred Flame, Produce Flame, which is an extra little fire cantrip, which you may think is redundant, in which case take Thaumaturgy, but I want to take Produce Flame, because I don't think I ever really have in a video. We're also going to be grabbing, like, you know, things like Guidance as well at level 1, so that all works out nicely. We're also going to be able to grab another spell, and I can't recommend Enhance Ability enough. It has quickly become one of my favourite spells in the game after I've kind of used it for utility purposes. It is super fun, and I highly recommend it. Next up is Cleric level 5, meaning we are going to be able to do use our Turn Undead feature to now deal a decent chunk of radiant damage to Undead. We're also going to get level 3 spells, including Fireball, our big Fireball. So we get it at level 11 total, which is actually the same time we would have got it if we just went straight for Elements Monk, and that version would have cost our key points and a big chunk of them as well. You'd get 13 key points as a max level monk, I believe, and Fireball, well, I guess in that, I think it's called Flames of the Phoenix for that class, costs 4. Like, especially when you have to use your key points for doing everything else that a monk does, really felt kind of bad to me. So I figured, you know what, let's grab it from Cleric instead and have a little bit of a holy fire kind of combo here, which I quite like. Next up, we do get to prepare some more spells, and obviously I cannot recommend Spirit Guardians enough, especially with the extra movement we're going to be getting from our monk levels. This is going to do some serious damage. As for your other spell, you can kind of take whatever you like here. Hold Person, Spiritual Weapon, Prayer of Healing could all be good. Silence could be interesting, because I don't think Silence can stop your key abilities. Somebody reports me on that. But also we have Mass Healing Word here, which could be a solid option. The Glyph of Warding, if you wanted to create a fire trap, which is probably what I will take, because, seriously, if you've not used Glyph of Warding, please do. It's super fun. And lastly, Cleric level 6, meaning we get our final subclass feature, which is Improved Warding Flare, meaning now that we can impose disadvantage on attack rolls that are going to hit our allies, which is nice. We're also going to be able to equip an extra spell here and take whatever you like. It really doesn't matter. I'm going to personally just be grabbing Mass Healing Word. And that is the build. Like I said, you have a lot of options here. You're going to be getting things like Fangs of the Fire Snake to be able to buff up your weapons and fight with fire damage and also attack at range. You're also going to be getting things like Embrace of the Inferno to do like fire damage with your key points, but also you will be able to cast things like Scorching Ray and Burning Hands as well using your spell slots. Thank you. You're also going to get 2 Channel Divinity points, allowing you to do some extra cool class feature stuff, and you have 7 key points overall, which is a nice chunk to do whatever you want to do. That's 7 Flurry of Blows. That's any of your spells. You can even recover these with Harmony of Fire and Water, and I believe these also recover on a short rest as well. So yeah, I feel like unless you're in a really, really long combat encounter, you're never going to feel a lack of resources on either side of our multi-classing coin. And also, again, obviously you just have a ton of utility with your cantrips and your support options from your spells, such as healing, Fairy Fire, Glyph of Warding, and again, just being able to do massive fuck-off damage with things like Fireball. So overall, and the fact is, like, yes, we didn't take Elemental Adept, but that doesn't matter as much, because since we've split our fire damage and our between fire damage, radiant damage, and our Flurry of Blows, so bludgeoning damage, you are going to have a lot of different options to be able to, you know, kind of get through any resistances that may come up. And also because we're actually going to be using a weapon with this build, I'm not as worried about, you know, not having as high unarmed damage, since it's not going to be the main focus of this build, whereas we're mainly going to be casting fire abilities and radiant abilities in addition to using our staff. So overall, I feel like we've got pretty solid options here. So let's get into the equipment, because I actually think this is where the build gets quite fun. So, our equipment, I feel like this is an interesting little setup here. You can swap things around if you feel like certain parts of it aren't reliable, and I'll get to that in a minute. However, I feel like I can label off some other options for you if you would like. I'm a bit all over the place this video. It's been a week since I've recorded anything. Anyways, let's get into the equipment. First off, the Diadem of Arcane Synergy. When you inflict a condition, gain Arcane Synergy for 2 rounds. Now, Arcane Synergy is quite powerful, but you can absolutely swap this out. But basically, this is meant to synergize with the fact that you can burn your enemies with your fire spells and some other equipment that we have here. So I figured, you know what, let's actually pick this up, but you could replace this with something like the Hat of Fire Acuity, or maybe even the Pyro Quickness Hat if you went to Act 3 to get an extra bonus action. That could be pretty fun. So feel free to play around with this slot, but the Diadem of Arcane Synergy could be obtained fairly early in the game, so I thought I would just include it here, but there are a few options. Next up, the Cindermoth Cloak. Again, I don't really fancy cloaks so much, at least fashion-wise. I mean, this one looks okay, but this one is obtained in Act 3 regardless, so it's a bit but a creature that damages the wearer within 2 meters receives burning, so it's just a quick and easy way to inflict burning, so, you know, whatever. It's just a nice option. Next up is the Infernal Robe. Now, if you know about how you get this robe, you would know that, well, kind of an Act 1 spoiler here, you only get this for killing Karlach, and basically Will get it as a reward from Mizora if you kill Karlach. So I feel like, obviously, if you are playing an evil character, fine, whatever, this is still easy to get. However, if you're trying to play a good aligned character and you want to recruit Karlach to your team, this sucks. However, and this is cool, most of you probably know this already, but there is actually a way to get the Infernal Robe without having to permanently kill Karlach. You do have to temporarily kill her, but you can kind of tell Will that you've killed her, which will progress his questline, then resurrect her, then get the reward from Azora, then recruit her to the party, and all of a sudden you've got a Will without horns, and you've also got the Infernal Robe. So this still works as of hotfix 9 patch 3. If this may be patched in the future, but I highly doubt it, because it actually feels like a really clever and thematic way for a character to be able to get around Mizora's Pact, and I feel like we're 3 patches in, and this has existed since launch, and the devs still haven't patched it, so I think we're pretty safe. But obviously there are other options like the Obsidian Robe if you don't want to go through that whole process. But I think the Infernal Robe just looks absolutely badass, and it's going to give us a ton of things that I really wanted for this build. First off, it's going to give us a +1 to our armor class, which is nice. Second, it's going to give us resistance to fire damage, which is on theme. And third, it is going to give us the ability to cast Fire Shield Warm, giving us a big fire aura, which you will have kind of seen in the thumbnail, and allows us to deal fire damage to anyone who attacks us, which is super, super cool. It doesn't require concentration, and it only costs a bonus action, so you can set this up at the start of a long battle and really get in there. It's super, super cool, and I'm glad we have it. Next up, the Gloves of Cinder and Sizzle. Your unarmed attacks deal an additional wonderful fire damage, and we also get to cast Scorching Ray once per long rest. This is just an extra use of Scorching Ray and an extra bit of fire damage that we can get pretty easily around the same time you would kind of be able to get the rest of this stuff, like the Diadem and the Infernal Robe. It kind of comes up in Act 1.5, so it's a pretty easy get, and we might as well grab it to give us a little bit of a bump, and it's also on theme, but there's probably some other things that would work here, but again, feel free to experiment. If you wanted to get maybe a different status condition, you could actually grab the Gloves of Belligerent Skies, which, because we're dealing radiant damage, you can inflict Reverberation, which would be a nice little combo with this, but feel free to play around with this slot. The last one is the Cinder Shoes. Whenever you burn an enemy, you gain 2 turns of heat. Now, I've been asked a few times to make a heat build, and I technically have. My Hellfire Pyromancer does utilize heat equipment, and does so quite well. However, I don't like heat as a buff. I think it is a lot of cost for not a lot of gain. For those of you that don't know, what heat does is you are engulfed by a vengeful fire. You take 1 to 4 fire damage each turn, but can use something called heat convergence. Now, taking 1 to 4 fire damage each of your turns is already a pretty costly investment, especially to build up heat convergence, which basically consumes your heat to fuel a powerful attack. So next time you deal fire damage, you deal an additional 1 fire damage for every turn of heat remaining. Now, heat can only stack up to 7 times, so that is 7 turns of taking continuous fire damage to get a potential extra 7 fire damage on, like, a fireball or something. Because the way heat convergence works is if you use Fireball, yes, every target will take that extra 7 damage, but if you use something like Scorching Ray, only the first ray gets that extra damage. In my opinion, heat is not really worth it, and I kind of just put this here to kind of remind me to have this discussion, because I feel like heat as a status condition is not worth building towards, in my personal opinion, unless you guys can tell me something otherwise. Please feel free to let me know, I might be wrong about this. Otherwise, there are plenty of other options that you've seen in a lot of my builds, such as the Evasive Shoes. I feel like would be an extremely good option here, as it's going to give you that extra bump to your armor class, and it's super easy to get early on in Act 2. There may be something else here, maybe like the Disintegrating Nightwalkers that you can get in Act 1, which are always a useful piece of kit to have, and maybe even like the Boots of Speed if you wanted to get a bonus action dash that doesn't cost a key point. It's entirely up to you, go with anything in this slot, but I did just kind of want to point out that you can get the heat mechanic with this build if that's something you want to build towards, but I personally would not recommend it. But again, there's just a ton of standard options here you could go with, so feel free to play around with this. Next up is our accessories, and if you've seen my Elemental Gish build concept, you know all about these. First up is the Necklace of Elemental Augmentation. When one of your cantrips deals acid, cold, fire, lightning, or thunder damage, you add your spell casting modifier to the damage dealt. We actually do have access to the Firebolt cantrip with this build, which is awesome, so we will be able to get a solid option at it. We'll be able to get solid damage out of it. We're also going to have the Ring of Elemental Infusion. Whenever you deal, in our case, fire damage with a spell or cantrip, that element infuses your weapon. Until the end of your next turn, you deal an additional 1d4 fire damage, so with your next successful weapon attack. So basically that means if we're casting our fire spells, which we should be doing anyway, that means our next weapon attack is going to get a bit of an extra fire damage, which is fun. I quite like it. And finally, the Ring of Arcane Synergy. When you deal damage with a cantrip, you gain Arcane Synergy for 2 turns, and Arcane Synergy adds our spellcasting modifier to our weapon damage, meaning we're going to get an extra chunk of damage. So basically, and here's the cool thing. So Fangs of the Fire Snake, right? This is a cool little synergy I found. Fangs of the Fire Snake counts as a spell for the sake of the Ring of Arcane Synergy. So not only are you using Fangs of the Fire Snake to deal extra damage on your next weapon attack, that also will stack with Arcane Synergy, meaning you're going to be getting extra fire damage all around, which is awesome. Super, super fun. Definitely worth kind of mixing these two together, and I think it's one of the only spells that work this way. Unfortunately, it doesn't trigger the Necklace of Elemental Augmentation or the Ring of Elemental Infusion, I don't believe, but it does work with Arcane Synergy, which I find interesting. But that's okay, because like I said, we have the Firebolt cantrip dealing 3d10 fire damage, which is going to be a solid option to set any of these off, especially if you're running low on those key points and just need an easy-to-use ranged spell attack. And where do we get this from? Well, we get it from our weapon, the Incandescent Staff. You can buy this from a vendor super early on in Act 2, and it's going to give you a bunch of really cool things. You gain a +1 to your ranged spell attacks. You also grant resistance to fire damage. I'm pretty sure this build has resistance to fire damage from 3 different sources, so that's just kind of funny. But you also do get the ability to cast Firebolt for free as much as you like, but you do also get the ability to cast Fireball once per long rest, so this is an easy way to get a big fire damage explosion in Act 2 quite easily. Yes, it's only once per long rest, which kind of sucks, but I feel like long rests aren't exactly that hard to do in this game. You're never really short for camp supplies, at least in my experience, so you know, feel free to just kind of spam fireballs as much as you like, as long as you have a long, at least once per fight, as long as you have the long rest to back it up. But yeah, overall, this is a +2 staff. It's going to deal... Wait, is it a +2 staff? Hold on. I may have made a mistake here. No, I thought it was a +2 staff. My apologies, but it is still a decent damage dealing staff that is going to give you a lot of extra damage options, which I think is really good. So yeah, overall, I think this is a pretty solid option that's going to get you through most of the game. It's very much on theme, and it just looks awesome with this build, so I can't recommend it enough. However, when you get into Act 3, you could pick up the... I believe in the previous video I called it the Markiplier staff. I'll have an infographic on screen for it. That basically just is kind of like an upgraded version of this, would let you play with heat a bit more and just get a bit more extra damage out of it and some more spell casting. So you could upgrade to that once you get that. But for now, the Incandescent Staff works pretty well for Act 2 and is my personal recommendation. And also obtainable around the same time as the Darkfire Shortbow. It's just going to give us an extra resistance to cold damage. A +2... It's a +2 bow, and it would also give you the ability to cast haste. Now, our constitution is a little bit on the lower end, so maintaining concentration probably isn't going to be the easiest thing in the world for us to do. I had a bit of trouble with it in my testing. However, it is just a nice extra option to have, since your AC will be high enough that you'll probably be dodging most attacks, so you won't have to worry about it too much. So yeah, that is the build. Overall, I think this is a really, really cool concept, just like this Holy Fire Monk that can do both radiant and fire damage. I've learned more into the fire damage kind of aspect of this build just because that was my personal choice, but again, if you wanted to kind of lean more into the radiant side of things, you could maybe take more levels in Cleric if you don't care so much about being a monk. But I personally quite like the idea of this like split, but again, you could go for more of a just pure 4 elements monk and still get a ton of options out of the build. I just think taking the Cleric multiclass is just going to give you a bit more utility overall. But yeah, I don't think I have much else to say. Oh, tomorrow is Halloween as of the time of this recording, which means my highly anticipated final Halloween build is going to be coming out. It is one that I have kind of hyped up a bit when people ask me about it. I've had a few build requests of people who were like, oh, I really want to see builds around like certain mechanics in the game, and I have kind of piled all of that into one highly thematic, highly engaging, true build. Like, I don't really want to spoil what it is, but I feel like you guys are seriously going to love it. I'm really looking forward to you guys seeing it. It's slightly experimental in its presentation, but I feel like you guys are really, really going to get a kick out of it. And I have a feeling it's going to be one of my most popular builds. It's just one of those things where I can just see it, like, being just good enough to kind of propel itself forward. My headphones keep beeping at me because they're low on battery. Yes, I know. Alright, fine, I'm screwed. Alright, this is the kind of shit I have to deal with, okay? In my life, just when I record, I have to plug in my goddamn headphones so they don't run out. Yeah, I see your red blinking light. You blink yourself. Right. Oh god, what is wrong with me? I am slowly losing my mind. I swear, the more I do this YouTube thing, the crazier I get. Anyways, so obviously tomorrow's build is going to be my Halloween build. I've already edited it, uploaded it. It's been ready to go for like a week now, because I was so into it. But I just got it all ready on like a day off that I had, and then had it uploaded and ready to go. As far as my next builds, again, I'm kind of just still doing build requests. I'm kind of riding that wave. And with Halloween being over and me kind of like not having a weekend build theme, I might step back from weekend uploads a bit and just upload on the weekdays, or I might move the deity builds to weekend slots. So I'll do regular builds and then a deity build on maybe a Saturday or a Sunday if I feel like I have enough time to record. Otherwise, maybe just 5 videos a week, which is still not bad, but I don't know. I'm kind of seeing, I'll see how I feel. Basically, weekend videos are no longer going to be guaranteed, but if they are, they're most likely going to be deity builds, because I quite like keeping a themed build for a weekend. Oh, also, again, people who listen to these videos all the way to the end, I absolutely appreciate you, because when I see your comments knowing that you did, I'm just like, thank you so much. This is a little bit of a call to action here. I need help from the community for something. I need Final Fantasy fans. I need your help, specifically 14 and 11 fans. So, not too long ago, I made a Red Mage build, which was based on the 11 Red Mage with a splash of influence from 14. But I want to build more 14 and 11 classes. Things like the Dark Knight really speak to me, but also things like, well, I mean, there's a Paladin class and a Warrior class. I mean, those are pretty simple. But things like the Machinist or the Gunbreaker would be super fun to try and replicate in this game. So, but it's a... When I watch like a Final Fantasy 14 game, like, don't get me wrong, I've played Final Fantasy 14. I've beaten all of A Realm Reborn. I'm not a huge fan of MMOs, so when it got to like the multiplayer only content, I was kind of like, I don't really want to continue. But I really, really enjoyed my time with it, and I have a decent idea of how some of the classes in that game work. I played a Paladin myself and really enjoyed it, but I really would like to like make more classes from that game, because I think that would be quite fun. But when I watch like a character guide or something for like one of those classes, I'm just like, what the fuck? I don't really know how to translate any of this into Baldur's Gate. So I would actually really like your guys' input into how to translate Baldur's Gate 3 classes, like what their theming is, what their overall like ability set is, like what their role is in the team. I understand it's like tanks, healing, DPS, all that stuff, but like the general things that each class does that separates it from the others within its like kind of tier, I guess. It's like what makes a Dark Knight different than a Paladin, for example. Like, that's the kind of thing I want to lean in towards. So any Final Fantasy 14 or 11 fans, if there's classes from 11, I haven't looked into as much yet, but I would really, really like to kind of try those builds. I feel like Dark Knight speaks to me the most at the moment, because I feel like that might be one of the more interesting ones to try and replicate. Because getting like a sword wielder with shadow magic, I think it could be a really, really fun idea. So yeah, any Final Fantasy 14 or 11 fans out there, please help me out with this. I'd really like your input. But yeah, anyways, I think that's going to do it for me. I kind of rambled on a bit more than usual, because the last time I recorded was a week ago, because I got that big batch of videos done on a Monday. So yeah, I'm back to recording daily now. So yeah, I've rambled on long enough. I'll leave you guys to it. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.